Spinning, we're thinking, and we're live. All right,
We're live.
cool. All right,
Okay.
episode 14. I have Ian from Artificer Geckos. We were actually literally just hanging out talking about show stuff and new people and lizards and all sorts of stuff. So for folks that aren't aware, let us know what your collection looks like. We just talked about you moving and trying to set things up in a new part of the country and all sorts of things. So after your giant move in a new place, what did you have to set up?
Well, let's see. With the name being Artificer Geckos, it was mostly geckos. Roughly, I want to say it was 179 geckos. I have a few snakes, some tricolor hognose, some
Awesome.
Malagasy. Why am I drawing a blank? Malagasy. Oh my gosh, sorry, the rear fanged. People always think they're a boiga, but they're not. Just a few snakes, not many. But for the most part,
Okay.
geckos and lizards. I range an awful lot of New Caledonia, gargoyles, lychees, chihuahuas, agricolae, known as the chameleon geckos. The obvious, like the morning geckos. I have the typus. A lot of people aren't familiar with those. They're a lot like a morning gecko, but they're smaller and more salamander-like. I like them, and I wanted to mention those tonight only because they, in my opinion, do better with thumbnail dart frogs. Morning geckos, if you take care of them, they actually get a little bit beefy to keep with a smaller dart frog. The typus stay nice and small, and they're very private. They stick to their bamboo shoot. So, and then let's see, what else did I bring? I brought 3 species of velvet gecko. A lot of people always ask. I do have the Adura, which is, I guess, like, how this is. There's trends. Sometimes it's this one, that one, that one.
That's the super sexy picture one.
the really, are you talking about the black and yellow?
Yeah, everybody freaks out.
The black and yellow is the fimbria. I have that too.
Oh yeah.
But the ones that I was the most worried about were the Japanese cave geckos, the orientalis. Right. And that's just because a lot of people are familiar with the Chinese cave geckos, which tend to be the yellow and black. There's actually multiple species from each country, but the yellow and black's the well-known one. The orientalis are my favorite. They're the Halloween. They're the orange and black. Sometimes you can get like a pinkish and black depending on the locale. But I love them, and they're dwarf. They stay smaller. I really do like, when it comes to the cave geckos, I like the smaller species.
Okay.
Not as active as some of the other ones I have, but I still love them. False chameleons, a lot of different day gecko species. I brought a lot. I brought my Asacus. I have 2 species of Asacus, Saracenorums, white collars and regulars. Just a whole, it's hard to try to nail them all, but a whole lot of geckos.
So you listed out a ton of stuff that it's not a leopard gecko. It's not a bearded dragon. It's not a sit on your shirt and take a selfie lizard. Why that avenue? What brought you to, smaller, specialized, set it up and let it live its lizard life kind of away from you type of species?
That's a culmination of things that happened, I think. For starters, to make it super short, as a kid, a lot of people that are our age would know this. We used to have to come home when the lights turned on outside in the street. And
yep.
My mom was a genius because I wasn't in the best neighborhood. A gentleman down the road was actually an importer. Back then you didn't have a lot. Pretty much every reptile was imported. And so the rule was I had to come home when the lights turned on unless I was at their house, because she knew where I was. I was an adult, so I could stay there as late as I wanted to. So instead of hanging out with some of my right?
Oh no!
Instead of
that's wicked.
Right. Instead of hanging out with my friends, most of which ended up getting into some legal trouble, I would stay there, and I literally grew up around this guy. I went from the little kid that would just go stare at everything to the guy that would take care of everything on like Memorial Day weekend when they went camping or whatever. So I was exposed to a very different world than what we have today. You know, you didn't have Eco Earth, you didn't have the Pangea branches and the sticks, and I mean everything. If it was a Pangea eater back then, you were giving it fruit or baby food.
Right.
It was just a
For
different
sure.
world. So I was building up my own collection, got married to a woman who didn't like reptiles, and just stopped. And everybody can chastise me for that because I do tell everybody now, don't ever stop. Don't stop because someone doesn't like them. Don't do it. You'll regret it for at least as long as the marriage goes. Ended up divorced and met the woman of my dreams a few years later, and we got married. And actually, we were together for about 2 years before we saw a banner for the Sacramento Reptile Show, and I was like, oh, I used to love those. She lost her mind. She loves tortoises. So it was like, didn't even know it, but we both kind of were like, well, we're going to the show. We're gonna get you a tortoise. We're gonna get you a gecko.
Okay.
And the reason that's really important is I was like, but I'm not getting anything like what I used to work with. I don't want a leopard gecko. I don't want a ball python. I don't want anything I had touched, you know. And this guy used to get some really neat stuff. I mean, we'd get mandarin rat snakes, ambanja chameleons, you name it. But I decided I want to get something a little more unusual. Now, you know this, I'm sure, but a lot of people who are watching and newer probably don't. Gargoyle geckos were rare then, much rarer then.
For sure.
And so there were crested geckos, and my best friend and his wife joined us, and he ended up wanting a crested gecko. So I was like, I'm not going to get that. I had never seen one because New Caledonia wasn't being imported when I was a kid. And so I was like, okay. And I found this gargoyle gecko, and it actually had really pronounced horns, much more pronounced than most of what I see even now. And I just fell in love with it. So I grabbed a gargoyle gecko pair, brought it home, and it bred. Well, then when it bred, there's always those people that want those little niche but not common geckos. So I started trading for other unusual geckos. To give you an idea of how unusual they were back then, I actually got a pair of Pseudodactylus pigwensis, the chirping ones, in exchange. So now I'm doing Pseudodactylus. And it just kind of exploded from there. Something I think a lot of people, it's good for them to know is I ended up, right before I moved, I had 330 something geckos. I actually offloaded quite a few to a pet store. I'm just going to say the guy's first name, Jeff, who was opening a pet store on the West Coast. Okay. But that whole thing started because I was trading. I was literally finding something I liked. When it worked and I could get it to go and it started to breed, I would trade. I didn't buy a lot of the things at first. I was experimenting and learning and making sure I mastered one before I got to the other. Because one thing that we see a lot with the more common stuff is if you start getting too much before you mastered it, you won't have the time. Something's going to suffer. It's just that simple.
Right. Absolutely.
So I just kind of, that happened. Then I started making friends because of some of the rare geckos with some familiar gecko names out there, Frank, Joe Hub, a lot of those guys. And I started doing trades with them. And so it just kind of blew up, and that's where it went. And then I started more recently going into the lizards and the snakes. I say lizards, meaning actual non-gecko lizards. And I just, two things happened. Number one, I found a few lizard species I'm just in love with. And number two, I really got tired of kids coming over and saying, but do you have any snakes? and you're going, no, I have like 300 geckos here, but no, buddy, sorry, I don't have a single snake for you to hold. Because I was going to schools and doing presentations, and everybody wants a snake, and I don't blame them. Right. I like snakes too. So that's kind of just a how I got into that many, and it just kind of turned into a hobby where I was trading with people from all over. I mean, I've had some come to me from Ham in Germany. So it's been an experience, and it's worth it. Do not stick with just one. If you're gonna get more than one, I should say, try something new, guys. That's you'd be amazed how many of these geckos. Going back to your original question, how many of these geckos yeah, they're not going to sit in your hand for 2 hours. They're just not. Some of them will, but some of them just no way. But their intelligence, their hunting, uh, heteronoshibinoi, they're a parthenogenic gecko that you can keep pretty similar to a leopard gecko. They will pack hunt. They make me think of Jurassic Park. They will literally, when I throw the crickets in there, they will come out and they will herd them. And I've even had some talks with Frank where I've witnessed a couple times where the mom twitches a tail, a baby twitches a tail, and the baby comes and takes a leg off of the cricket the mom has in her mouth. So I'm still learning some of these social behaviors you see that you can't get that with a lot of the more common species, you know. And I don't know if it's that they don't. It could be that they did it in the wild, but they've just been so domesticated. It could be a lot of things, but the IQ on some of these are just amazing. And of course, like the Peguensis, you're not going to hear a leopard gecko or even a cresty or gargoyle chirp in a way that makes anybody visiting your house think your fire alarm's short on a battery. You know, those things, they howl. Yeah, the things that make me, I always tell people, I used to get into it with Frank sometimes, he'd be like, but this one's really rare. And I'd be like, I don't care if it's rare. Tell me why it's cool. I have everything from a tokay all the way up to a lot rings. I want the ones that I think are really neat and have something about them. And the tokay with me, it was just the fact that A, I get to see mine out all the time. He doesn't hide, and B, he barks all the time, and I just love that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we have a pretty diverse collection doing the shows and stuff, and it's the same way where, you know, kids think giant things are cool. Kids think, you know, stuff that they perceive as like, oh, big lizards are dangerous or whatever, you know, like it's the wow factor. And it's so much harder to explain it. Like, cause I have mornings and different things and, you know, and it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, this thing is parthenogenic and like why it's super cool. And, you know, when they're younger, it's like, no, man, I just want to hold a corn snake. Like, I don't, you know, whatever cool story you have. But, no, I get that. And I actually, when I made the little blurb for the episode, I mentioned that, like, so in your about section, and in quite a few of the things that I've read from you, you talk about like old school type of stuff. And that is very much that vibe of you. Some things were successful, so you traded with some folks, met some people, and it was more of a handshake kind of deal. And then also on the keeping aspect of reasoning, you know what I mean? Like this thing, you know, these have this attitude, these have this behavior, these have whatever it may be, as opposed to like a lot of people knock like morph type stuff in the market side of herpetoculture, but that's more of, it's not bad. It's more of a collector type of thing. Like, you can have all these different colors or kinds or whatever. It's just a different mentality. But it's definitely newer. You know, it's when you talk to the old school guys, you know, back in the 70s trading king snakes in like a Waffle House parking lot, you know, but that's what it was. Like, you need, because back then it was a little more of the story, you know, folks that actually went out to the OKT Hunt Club or whatever. But it was like, you had to have something. Like, it had to bring something to the table. Like, you know, you can't just show up with whatever milk snake and it's like, well, why? Who cares? Like, what's the deal? And then you would hear the story from the guy of, oh, it does this cool thing, or this is why it's unique or special. And that's where kind of the value was, you know? But yeah, so like to hear you describe that, like, yeah, that is very, very old school as opposed to kind of the newer framework for folks.
Right. And it says something about, I'm sorry. It says something about the science too. I mean, because in a lot of ways, what you're seeing is that people are learning of genetics a lot better than they did back when we were doing it back in those days. You know, back in those days, you were trying. That's the reality of it. You were, I was going to say a second ago, I find that the newer generation, and there's nothing wrong with this because every generation does something amazing. So please, no one take this like I don't approve. I think it's amazing. But I find that the older generation is also a lot more setup based. When you started back then, your setup was way more vital. You didn't
Oh yeah.
have stuff pre-made, so you were worried about everything, and you got a lot more of your information from notes from people who had gone and done it or gone and seen it in the wild. And I think that's why I was platonically attracted to Frank when we met. I think it was that, he goes out and sees them. And I was like, I didn't know you guys existed anymore, because now if I look anything online, it's everybody's blog, what it's doing in their tank. So, to give you an idea, when I got my first Chihuahua, which was not very long after the gargoyle, relatively speaking, I literally went and looked up field photos. And every photo that I found, they were on like this stump of a tree. Like it was a big knotted stump, though, the kind that spread outward. So I literally built a foam coated root system of a stump of a tree, and I don't even when I have my everything set up right, everybody's fine. They hatch. The babies immediately go to a little leaf litter pile in the other corner, and I just check there whenever I know it's about that time, and sooner or later I'll pop one up and there's a baby. You do learn their patterns. You learn that the babies aren't, if you give them a little leaf litter pile over here, they're going to run to that. It's some instinct, it's some whatever, and that's where you'll find them every time. At least mine. I can't speak for everybody.
For sure.
Just fun times.
Well, and it makes sense that. So when you talk about setup type of stuff, like you were saying, you grew up hanging out at a person that could import and had exposure to all these different things, and at that time, we didn't know that, what we're just gonna have to check out where it's from. Like we'll ask the dude that we got it from, like, hey, did you go to Borneo? What's it like there? I don't, it was, because we genuinely didn't know these things. That information became so much more important to us, whereas now it's twofold. Like, it's a good thing that a lot of that information is super accessible now. It's no big deal. You could Google it, set it up, good to go. But I think it loses a little bit of like nuance in that you can Google how to set up X species, and it tells you parameters, and you recreate those parameters, but you don't actually know why you're doing that. You're just doing what you're told. And so you could be successful, and lots of people are, and they follow the recipe and follow the parameters, and those animals thrive, and those parameters are available for a reason, because they are functional. But then if you don't know why you're doing that, like, that's where you start to run into the issue. If something doesn't work or something changes, before we went live, we were talking about how you had moved, and if you didn't know why you were creating your setups in the way that you were, when you moved to a whole different part of the country, you'd have been way behind the 8 ball trying to figure out why now this isn't working. This is now I'm, having all these problems and these struggles. Well, because you're just following your directions. Well, if your directions are from a dude in Oregon and you live in Florida, it doesn't jive, But it's just a different mentality, I guess. Like, it's awesome that it's available to folks, but then it doesn't force you to go any deeper, I guess.
Well, and one of the when I would give talks at the herb societies out in the West, one of the things I always make sure to mention was, and this is a true story. When I got a hold of my very first cave geckos, I went on to the web, and there was nothing on them at that moment. It just hadn't blown up yet, hadn't taken off. There wasn't anything as far as like a care sheet, except for one. So I start looking at it, and really quickly I'm realizing this doesn't add up to what I know, which wasn't a lot, but I knew where they were from. And one of the things that stuck out to me was it said heat pattern. And for people that don't know, the cave geckos, they're a moderate, mild room temperature gecko. I mean, they're happier in the cooler, humid. They're kind of the opposite of your leopard gecko in a lot of ways, and yet this sounded kind of like a leopard gecko setup, like a dry leopard gecko setup. And I was like, what am I reading here? Well, I took a look at it. They were in like Finland or something like that. I can't even remember which country, but it was a country that made me go, okay, you guys are in places where your houses are probably 40 degrees,
Right.
you know, on a bad night. And it kind of goes right to what we were talking about before we started, where I was saying, you know, even me, the care sheets I would give out, because I don't remember, I don't recently, but I know that in California, it's the law. If you're selling a reptile, you have to give a care sheet. You have to have it handy.
Really?
And so, or fish, oh yeah, or fish and game will come down on you in a heartbeat.
I did not know
I was
that.
kind of laughing. Yeah. I was laughing because as I was telling you before we started, I literally would need to edit about 50% of them if I was selling that same animal here, just because of the humidity difference. Sacramento being so dry and arid, you had to mist more than you would here. I just based on what I'm seeing when I mist my tanks, there's times where I come in the morning, or it's kind of I've balanced it out now, but in the beginning I was going, oh my gosh, there's still water on the leaves from 9 o'clock last night, and it's just because of all the humidity here that water just sticks around.
Right.
So I'm like, well, I would probably have people killing their gargoyle geckos because, you know, in Sacramento, I was like, they need that just that lower level humidity. It doesn't have to reach all the way up, but make sure you're getting that down there. And here, it wouldn't take as much to get that. So
For sure.
And I don't just if I could touch on this because you mentioned it, the parameters. The funny thing is, I don't. I always look at what they are, but I have to be completely transparent with you. I don't use the gauges anymore at all. And I think it's because back in the day we really didn't use them either. But what I do is I just look at the habitat. Almost everything I have is in a natural habitat. And to give you an idea, I have some animals that I've learned if my pothos are not sinking over and dying, they're good. If my snake plant is starting to die, I'm overwatering. I mean, I've learned, it's kind of funny, but you've learned.
That's awesome.
I've had times where one of my monsoons has gone bad because those monsoons, oh my God, Mist King, if you can afford it. Sorry, I had to say it. But
I get
I've
it.
had a monsoon's gone on the blink on me, and I don't know it because, you know, they were on timers and I'm trying to take care of everything. And all of a sudden
Sure.
I look and my they're not true pothos, but, you know, the pothos, as people know them, are just all like, yeah, on what's going on here. And I go look at the monsoon tank, and I realize, oh, that thing's should be lower than it is. I mean, it's still at like 3/4 full, and it's been a week. And so, you know, I turn it on, and sure enough, it's on the blink. And so I've kind of learned how to identify it that way too. And
sure.
I do what works for me, and I say that meaning different people. Some people are just so much better about the numbers. They will get if you give them those parameters, they're going to be able to keep them. I find that I'm more visual. I look at the soil, I look at the, you know, substrate. With some of my desert species, believe it or not, I look at the rock. One of the species I didn't talk a lot about are some of my hemidactylus and some of my Asakis. They are literally in places where it's desert. It's in the desert, but if they were to fall from the rocks they're hanging out on, they'd be in the ocean. So you have this very tricky mix of, we want it warm and hot, but they need to have that humidity burst going. And so what I've learned to do, and one of my animals had never ever successfully even laid until I did them, got moon rock, the really craterous rock, kind of like lava rock. And I made sure that the misters were hitting that. So what you ended up getting was this rock that always was a little bit soaked on the inside, throwing off some humidity. And so in some cases, I'm looking at those rocks and going through some of those deep craters have some humidity. You can tell because it's up against the glass. You'll get just a little bit of the fog. So with me, it's visual. It really is. But I mean, I've seen people that are just amazing. Joe Hub, a couple others. They're just amazing with how on it they are about knowing the actual the data, if you will.
Yep. I've actually, I give some of my friends a hard time. So, and of course, it's a generalization, of course, but my whole thing with folks that keep dart frogs is, I'm like, you guys are just really good gardeners. Like you set up a vivarium, and it's like, oh yeah, well, if I can grow an orchid, then totally those frogs will survive. And like
Right.
you can literally just look in your enclosure and be like, well, everything's blooming, and that means there's got to be enough water. And then if you look in the dirt down there, there's a really cool frog. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
then are you taking care of frogs, or are you like a really awesome flower grower? Like, what is,
Yeah.
and that works, within
No,
reason,
it
of
does.
course, but
It does. I had a friend out on the west. I was real good friends with this guy. Amazing guy. If you're ever out that way, his name's Jeremy, and he's JL Exotics, and he's nothing but he does them all. He does some of the really really cool tree frogs too. But with that being said, I used to tease him off and on and say things like, why ABG? Because that's one of their big things. Use the Atlanta Botanical Gardens mix for the substrate,
yep.
and I'm like. I'm not gonna lie, it drives me crazy when I see someone doing it for geckos, only because it's a great mix if you're growing plants. A lot of that mix is not necessarily needed for the geckos. I've only had like 2 geckos where I've noticed a difference, and both were leaf tails. Both were Europlatus actually.
Okay.
But for the most part, I think that's one of the things that sometimes I can appreciate the effort, but I feel like, guys, you don't have to put a true ABG layer on top of clay pebbles with a screen separator for your morning geckos. There's times where I just feel like, oh, it's but I never want to take away from somebody who's done all that either. So it's kind of like, what do you do? I just go with it, but I feel like it's kind of hard. We had true story. We had a pair of morning gecko. Well, I say pair. I had a morning gecko that managed to get out of my tank because if you keep them, sooner or later, one gets out. It's just how it is with those things.
Yep.
Well, I just happened to keep them in my living room. And there was a female that comes one time we're watching a movie and we have this huge, probably, I don't know, 5 by 7 feet wedding photo frame up on the wall. And this morning gecko, while we're watching TV, just kind of starts coming out. Well, because we have a projector, so it's like right there, walking right by the screen. And Misty's like, "Are you going to get it?" And I'm like, "This was me in my naive days." I was like, "No, they need their tropical. She's not going to breed. I'll catch her some other time, right?" Well, call me a procrastinator. I didn't bother. Then one day, I see 2 coming out, a big one and a little one. And Misty like lost her mind. Ian, now. I mean, the movie had to be paused, and so I go and I move the frame, and I'm like, "There's no eggs. I don't know." I'm like, maybe another little one got out. Well, no, they're actually. Mom had gone down between 2 tanks because back then I had like a rack, and the Exoterra type tanks. How at the bottom they have the little black parts that stand out. So there was a gap like that big.
Yep.
Mom had gone down there and laid a couple little eggs right there, and I'm guessing just from the misting system, some of the water was just enough to keep them going. And so it's one of those examples I like to give people because I really do believe, and this definitely is with me, and a lot of the times where I have failed, it's that I'm too involved. Sometimes if you give them all the right environmental factors, they're going to find where it's going to work for them. But that one always cracks me up because I will literally have, I gave Wally Kern a hard time. Gosh, this was 8 years ago or so, but I said to him, he said, "Oh, my latest one is by someone," and it was like how to keep morning geckos, and they had the false bottom, the whole 9 set up, and I went, "Wally, these things were hatching in my living room outside of a tank." I promise you, it's a little easier than that. I love Wally for the record. He's just, to me, he's one of those faces you need in the community just because he's so positive. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of funny. I think I've always done more damage getting too involved. Sometimes we're just so into the passion. So that's a good thing for anybody who does change. If you go from a leopard gecko, especially from like a leopard gecko to a crested gecko, or if you go from a western hognose snake to a tricolor hognose snake, you're gonna feel like you're not doing enough because you're not heating them that way. You're not giving them that kind of light. You're not, there's a lot more Is the humidity good? Okay, we're good. I gave them Pangea last night. I can walk away now. There's a lot less of that getting into it. Same with the tricolors. They're a hognose snake. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're a hognose snake. But I literally keep mine room temperature in we'll call it a cocoa-based soil mix, and mine are happy as pie. They don't need the heat of the Western hognoses, and they don't need all these. You don't have to worry quite as much about the dryness of the dirt and all that, and so it will feel like you're not doing enough. And I can tell you, at least me historically, that's when I mess up. When I try to be super dad, that's when I tend to go too far on something, and suddenly I'm giving my gecko a little bit of asthma with all the humidity, or just that need to do something that I shouldn't.
Yep. My wife and I were actually just not really complaining, but kind of going back and forth on our drive home from the show today of that reptiles, with some exception, kind of thrive on that benign neglect, where, and especially for new people, it's so, you always see questions and stuff of it won't eat, or I just got it, and so on and so forth. And it's like, okay, well, what did you just set it in there and not look at it for a day or two? Oh no, I check it every day. I check it at nighttime when I turn the lights off. I check, and it's like, yeah, there's a giant naked monkey outside of the box. The thing is terrified, and it. So many species, that benign neglect of everything is acceptable, food and water and heat and so forth. And then you need to go away, and they can do lizard things,
Especially when you first get it. When you, I cannot tell you how many people would get a gargoyle or a Saracen, or those two were very. I honestly think because they weren't as bred as much, because it does seem like every generation gets a little more comfortable. I don't know how else to put it. A leopard gecko that you bring home and is too stubborn to eat is a lot harder to find now than it was, say, 30 years ago, for whatever reason.
Oh, sure.
But with my gargoyles and Sarahs, I've had more than one person say, well, it's not eating. And I'm going, I leave it alone. Leave it alone. That's what you need to do. And it's like you said, when you ask, they're like, well, I brought him home and I let my brother hold him, and I invited my best friend over and he held him, and Dad wanted to see if he had the guts to hold him. Oh, and he got dropped twice. And then I put him in the tank with the food and he's not eating. And I'm going, yeah, can I juggle you and then drop you off at McDonald's and see how your stomach feels? It's right. You have to give them a little bit of a period. And there are tricks. I used to share a lot of them that I've learned too that help quite a bit, especially with the bug eaters. For whatever reason, I'm just going to throw this out there. This is one of those little things I used to do, and it was shocking. But every once in a while, I'd get a wild caught animal, and I had a wild caught Abronia that the name's escaping me, but it wasn't the Graminia. It was a much rarer one, and it came to my house, and it did not want anything to do with food. And I was doing things right. I was leaving it alone, but it still just had no interest. And so I noticed that one time I was feeding a tank next to it, and it didn't seem to care. But when I came back around, because I was doing my rounds, he was up against the glass like he wanted it. So I took a cricket and I threw it in there, and he ignored it. And so I did the craziest thing, and I have photos of this somewhere. I took the bag that the crickets were in. I had a zippy bag, whatever. I put like just 3 in there. And this was one of those tanks with a little screen square in the front, like an aquarium with a screen square you flip up. I flipped up just a tiny bit, pinched the bag, and closed it so that they were dangling on the outside of the tank. And I left it alone. And I used to keep cameras in my reptile room. I'll have them in here again. But in SAC, I had them set up, and I watched. I'm a nerd like that. I just watched. And sure enough, this, for whatever reason, wanted to be, I'm going to call it tempted. I don't know what else to call it, but by leaving the bag on the outside where he could not reach them, he went from checking them out to being up against the screen to smelling and this was all over a period of like 24 hours. This wasn't quick. But in the end, this is one of those times where I almost said a bad word. I SU not. I I opened up the screen and I took those same crickets, same bag, and I dropped them, and he took them. And I had this catalog somewhere in my videos on my laptop. And it was the weirdest thing, but for whatever reason, he just wasn't interested when I would just drop them off. If I had done that, he was not interested. I think maybe I was spooking him, is the only thing I could think of. But once he had recognized what was in the bag and had been tempted enough to go, I'm really hungry and they're right here, why can't I get them? He was at least over it enough to start eating. And it's the weirdest thing. And those are the kind of things I'm saying you'll see. You come across the weirdest behaviors. But it's worked since then with a couple of species now, where it's almost like they have to identify something else as the food source to realize that whatever you're doing, they can lock onto what the food source. It was just the weirdest thing, but it's worked multiple times since then. And those are the crazy things I've come across.
I could see that though, that it trying to kind of disassociate you, I guess.
Yeah,
because it is hard. There isn't really a good system. I mean, what you did was pretty ingenious, but I mean, just in general, like in pet keeping, there isn't really a good system for live food delivery that doesn't involve us. You know what I mean? Like can, herbivores and stuff, I can set things out, or, you can hang lettuce and stuff and let them find it and do their own thing. But yeah, I mean, live stuff, it almost always requires you to do it.
Right.
Yeah,
I came up with a good one. However, so it's been painful over the initial return to the reptile world, because to give you an idea, I was banned from a Facebook group that I'm not as angry with anymore. So I'll go ahead and not mention them. But there was a time where I got banned for suggesting natural substrate, because everybody back then was hooked on the paper towel thing or tile, and that was it. And I literally got banned because impaction.
Right.
And so with that being said, please.
I remember all those pictures of Australia with the dirt roads covered in paper towels.
Absolutely. That was close to the kind of comment I said that got me banned. But
pretty much. Yeah.
But that being said, something I had learned to do to deliver the bugs to some of my more stubborn people, I'm going to get it for this, but I actually had a single red LED, and I would put it at the top of my tank, and I would have a vine that went to the top where the LED was, and I would throw a few dubia into the tank, and the dubia would hide, which they do. They hate being out. But as soon as it got dark, guess where all the dubia ran? Right up to the light. And so what would happen is it actually worked very well, because I could sit there, and I actually have videos of this too. I could sit there and watch some of my geckos get smart enough to start waiting for them to come up at night on the top of the screen. The one thing people underestimate is their opportunistic intelligence, I'll call it. They are very opportunistic, and if they learn it, they'll go there. And so that really did work. That worked like a charm. The only thing I did learn that this is, sometimes I wonder if this is what gets the red lighting a bad name, is you have to be really smart about the placement. You have to look and make sure that you put it somewhere where the animal's not going to see its own reflection on the inside of the glass off of the red. Because the only thing I have seen so far using red LEDs that I could say, well, maybe that's where the it hurts them came from, was I did see one case where, unfortunately, a gargoyle kept seeing itself and kept trying to attack itself, but the vine was far enough away from the glass that it was literally dive bombing face first into the glass, climbing back up, seeing itself, dive bombing again, and as soon as, it didn't take me long to, fortunately, my old house, anybody who's visited would know I had them all in kind of like a nook in the living room, so I was aware of anything like that right away. But I would hear the thunk, and then the thunk, and then the thunk, and it hit me, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening is they see the reflection, so they're jumping after what they think is another male, and it's not, but of course they're still hitting themselves. And so I don't know if that's where it came. Just know that I actually have a Sarah Sonorum that's going on 13 years old now, that grew up under red. I've always used LED, so I don't know if there's something to the red light bulbs that we don't know. But I always get shot down for having red in my tanks, and I can tell you I would never do anything that would endanger them. And at this point, unless they're dying slow deaths over 10 years, it's not hurting them. It's not doing anything to them. I always make sure there's a canopy just in case, and that could be part of it too. But this goes back to seeing them in the wild. In the wild, go to Hawaii. Pay attention to any street lights you see, because there will be a gecko or 5 at the light. This goes back to that opportunistic thing. They're there waiting.
For sure.
So,
dude, that's
I'm
genius.
really,
Getting Dubia to chase that light. That's cool.
Oh, they will.
I'm absolutely going to try that now.
Oh yeah, give it. Just
That's
make sure
cool.
it's a nice bright one. And if you're worried about your animal, because I had a couple people go, what? I'm worried about it, and I'm like, well, put a fake leaf. Take a fake vine leaf, zip tie it to your little screen so it's blocking the light enough that it's not right in your gecko's eyes if you're worried about it. But I've done it enough now where I'm like, I've got geckos that'll breed and jump on my hand if they think I have food coming with the red light. So it's not bugging them enough to stop them from doing anything. And all of my geckos have a hide so that they live and they go there during the day. But if they didn't like the light, they could get away from it. And some of them choose to stand right next to it for exactly what we were just talking about. They're like, this calls bugs. I'm gonna wait right here.
Oh yeah.
So
well, and that's I've never understood that too. Like, I have pretty functional eyes, and I don't stare at street lamps. But I've seen a leopard. Not a leopard. Geez, a tokay. I've seen a tokay literally just about put their foot on the surface of that thing when I know it will burn you, and they're literally just snatching moths. Like if it didn't blind him to sit there next to that 3-foot bulb, like I'm pretty sure he's okay.
Yeah. That's just it. I think I think one thing that has kind of become hard for me to see in the hobby is I don't know how else to put it except for, and I don't mean this disrespectful, but the mommy daddying of the gecko. This poor creature is so fragile that the light will kill it, and this will kill it, and that'll kill it, and I'm going, I don't know how to tell you this, but these things are so better evolved than us for so many functions in life. They're more resilient than us. They lose a tail, they grow it back half the time. You can't comprehend how nominal. And what I use is the LED little string lights. They're not in the tank; they're above the tank. And that is just nominal to these guys compared to the stuff probably the stuff we're eating as far as health risk goes.
Well, there's that. No, I think people get, especially newer people, I think they do get a little bit wrapped up with, because we tell them about parameters, the thought process is if you go outside of that, it could kill them, or it's somehow like really, really negative. Instead of us, I think it's more incumbent on us to to be better at explaining gradient, I guess, where it's one of those, like, yes, you can very easily cook a gecko if you use a Euromastix heat lamp or a monitor heat lamp, but within reason, within a gradient, if you have this light or you had this heat source and so on and so forth, they'll figure it out themselves.
I love that you said that. Because I literally have a PowerPoint that I ran for one of the talks I did that was gradients. The whole talk was based on gradients because, and not just the light, but the humidity, the light, the dark versus the shade versus the heat versus the cool. I really do think something that I kind of had gotten pretty well known for on the West was that I almost all of my geckos when I'm set up are hatched in their enclosure. I don't pull out. I don't incubate. That sounded terrible, but you know what I mean.
I saw quite a bit of that on your posts, and that is super cool. I am very impressed by that.
I am convinced it's the gradient. So I think you nailed it. That's my personal opinion. When I put a tank together, just one little thing, I always make sure that my misting head is going to hit a log or a vine that is down in my soil. not just on the soil, but down, so that you get this gradient of more water here than the one over here that's just free spraying, and it's going to get a little bit drier here quicker than over here in this little bush area. And I do these things with an intentional gradient, and I have found that my geckos, even if I move them to another tank, will still lay in the equivalent gradient spot that they were doing over here. And so
Sure.
there's something to that gradient. People ask me, well, what about the incubation? I always laugh. I learned this from Joe Hub. It wasn't for breeding purposes, but it was one of the ways he was breeding some of his geckos, or heating some of his geckos. I put the heat pad on the side in the back instead of underneath for some of my geckos. And what I've learned is they will lay their eggs as far away from that heat pad as they want it, where they feel it's comfortable. And so you get your gradients going. You have this heat pad in the back throwing the heat out this way. They go midway, and then they find their water, the humidity area they want, because even the dry ones, I do give them a little bit of cork bark wood, just a little bit, and they find their gradient and they do it. And that's what I think, swinging all the way back to what we were talking about. It's that mothering thing I talk about, the over mothering thing, where if you give them everything that you can think of that they would want in their environment, they're gonna find what works for them, and they're gonna make it work. They don't need you taking care of everything for them. It's actually, to me, a disservice in a lot of ways. Now, I'm not against people who do it. I envy some people, because there's some things I can only hatch in tank. I cannot hatch in an incubator for my life. And some people would laugh if they found out some of the failures I've had trying to incubate something. Yeah, I really do believe that, we're good, but nature's better. It's just that simple. Nature has it down, and if you give it the ingredients it needs, it'll take care of it. So.
Well, and I think that starts to come into play for a lot of people with the whole gradient thing in it. At least that I've noticed is size, right? So we get really wrapped into like packages, like, oh, I went and got the chameleon package or the gecko package or what have you. And it's usually the perfect thing that fits on your desk, right? Which might not be big enough for whatever it is that you're housing. And then because you started yourself in these small constraints, now you're struggling with the parameters. It's very stressful for you, and you feel you're going to overshoot or mess it up or what have you. And then you're eliminating that choice for the animal, and it sucks because space is a real thing for people, and it can be difficult to house things in larger enclosures or what have you. And it almost, like, on our end, it's easier for us to be like, put it in a bigger thing so it has more choices. And it's like, well, yeah, but you could have kept it in this enclosure that you had planned. Maybe if you used a smaller light, or you used a different mist regimen, or or so, like, you could have changed things to fit this. And our answer is like, well, if you put it in a bigger box, then your mistakes become okay because it can get farther away from your mistake, and then it's okay. And it's like, well, wait a minute. What if you just started by not having it be a mistake? Wouldn't that be better? And it's like, oh yeah, it's way easier though, just to put your mistake in a big box.
Right.
What?
No, I used to joke. I used to call that the aquarium syndrome, because I used to do reef tanks, and
yes,
it was a known thing. If you can get a bigger tank, you can be more careless. It's just that simple,
Yeah, I was a nano reef and pico reef guy. When nanoreef.com was cool. It probably still is. I have no idea. Yeah, man, that was always like, you're that idiot with like the droppers. Like, if I screw up, everything will die because it's in a box this big. And then there's a dude that's got like an aquarium the size of a Prius. And he's like, nah, man, you just dump it in by the bucket. And then the fish swim through the cloud. It's cool. It's like the real ocean. I'm like, man, come on. Yeah,
but you're nailing it. It's the truth.
And it works. Like, you can't tell me it doesn't work. The dude's got a shark in his living room or whatever, Oh yeah. I used to get so mad because I love the small stuff. And my wife and I would, we'd get little gobies or whatever, and it's like, okay, in this 4-inch box, we can keep this really expensive crab.
Right.
You can't ever mess up,
Nope.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it makes sense though that a prevailing attitude like that would trend over to other pets,
Right.
especially when like that hobby is light years ahead of us in equipment and lighting, and we steal a ton of ideas from them. We steal things from bird folks and people that are way that have more experience or whatever in the American Society for Pets. And then it makes sense that we'd be behind the times, quote unquote, with the thought processes, where now people are like, look, dude, you can buy a doser and you can do all these special things and you can keep a small tiny tank or whatever.
Right.
Whereas we're all still like, okay, you got to keep it in this giant box because if you keep geckos and small stuff, you'll just kill them. That's the answer.
Right.
Stop. And it.
Oh yeah.
We're reef keeping 12 years ago.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And to add to that, we are reef keeping where people are just still. You're gonna love the little analogy, but people are just realizing the value of live rock. One thing I say so often in the I try not to get too involved in the groups too much, the Facebook groups, just because, let's face it, there's a lot of angry people on them. But what I like to do is whenever I see someone saying, is this a big enough tank for? I always try to throw in there, keep in mind that even the biggest tank, it's going to be your decor that determines what or how much of what you can put in there. Because there are geckos I could put in a 4-foot wide, 2-foot tall tank, but if I put 2 sticks in there, they're going to kill each other. They're sooner or later, one's going to try to overbreed, or if they're aggressive, they're going to fight, or whatever. Something's going to happen. But I've learned, and I won't go into this, but if you want to talk sometime, like if I go to Tinley sometime and you want to chat, I'd love to have just a chat with you. I can tell you, you'd be surprised at some of the species I can keep a 1-4 or whatever, and there's never been any harm because their tank is not only big, but it is a forest. If somebody wants to be further away, you can disappear from sight, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Sure.
And it was the same with the tanks. If you had a crab and you had a fish that's not known to be aggressive but might take advantage of a crab, if you have no live rock, that crab's gone in 2 minutes. But if you have live rock, that crab might live its entire life out in there because he's going to be hanging out within all the different cliffs. And a lot of people seem to miss that that's just as vital to the geckos. And one thing I will say is every tank that I have good success with, I have live plants in. And you can call it Wicca voodoo, or you can sit there and go, well, one of the plants I've always sworn by was the snake plant. And I mean, they're taking them up to the space station because they're actually studying their ability to really, really, really filter air. I mean, that could be, we don't know enough yet, but it does make a difference. For sure. I know that. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where people get really in their feelings about that debate.
Right.
And it's like, I don't care if it's a box full of silk plants from Hobby Lobby or you're a master gardener growing orchid. Like, it doesn't matter. It's the function portion that's important. If you can accomplish it hanging paper towels and they are thriving for you, then rock on. Like, it's it doesn't matter. It becomes kind of like accusatory, like this is better or what have you. And but I think that like the basis of that kind of like conflict to my thought process goes back to how we were saying before about the parameter thing of you need to know why you're doing that.
Absolutely.
Like, are you making a forest because you need high humidity and microclimates and so on and so forth, or are you making a forest because you're keeping something like a chameleon where
Mm-hmm.
a vast majority of their lives are based on visual barriers and visual
Mm-hmm.
acuity and interaction. Okay, well,
Right.
then fake plants are real. You have to have them because that's how that animal
Right.
functions. And
Mm-hmm.
then if you accomplish it with real stuff and I accomplish it with Hobby Lobby, who cares?
Right. Right.
It. I think people are arguing or debating those points maybe because they don't quite know exactly what they're arguing about. And it.
Yeah.
But
I
because when you
I
hear
think
somebody like yourself that has all this success, like there's no way to discount that. Like, yes, it does work.
right.
I saw it work. This person did it and it was super successful, so it
Right.
totally works. And it.
Yeah. I think it's. I think that unfortunately, we live in a time, and this has been a disservice to so many hobbies, but we live in a time where people want to take stands. I am anti-light. I am for the light. I am fake plant. I am real plant. You know what I mean? People just they don't want to say. The reality is that historically, it's almost always somewhere in between. It really
Oh
is
yeah.
that you can usually get away with something in between either way. You can have real plants or fake plants or a combination. And like you said, going back to the goal, uh, there are reptiles that definitely thrive with clean air. What'll kill them quicker than anything is if their tank hasn't been cleaned. And there's a few that I honestly feel like, and this is an analogy I just recently, or a metaphor I just recently realized because my wife got chickens. And chickens, if you don't clean their coop, they will literally die from the smell and toxins of their own poop.
Yep.
So, with that being said, if you have an animal that likes ventilation, likes a screen, likes whatever, me personally, whenever I'm dealing with something like that, I throw snake plants in there just because they're so well known for what they're supposed to be able to do to the air. And I'm like, maybe it doesn't help, but it can't hurt. You know,
Right.
for the record, I keep using snake plant because that's the one plant that I can tell you I have not always intentionally, but I have literally seen crickets mow down, animals eat, and nothing. They are perfectly fine. Snake plants just are safe. Like your typical mother-in-law's tongue, I think they call it too. There's like 20 names for them, but
Yeah.
they're safe. And so I'll throw those in there because they'll grow in anything. They're starting to debate whether or not they need light. Um, they seem to need such a low amount of light that you don't even need like a typical lit up room
Mm-hmm.
to grow them. I had one accidentally grow. I laid one down on one of my tanks once, but I wanted it not to die, so I put its roots under a mister that was going into the tank, and the snake plant started growing a second root up this way, without because it was under the thing, and so I mean they'll grow in pretty much anything as long as you're giving them their occasional water. So just a thought if anybody ever wants to try them, try a planet tank. Those are the ones I recommend. And I'll tell you right now, the New Caledonia things, as long as it's not a lychee, because a lychee will destroy anything you put in there. The gargoyles, the Sarahs, they all love them. Put them along the back. Your gargoyle will hide there instead of in a cork hide. And then whenever you want to see them, you can look around the side of your tank and you'll actually see your gecko in full color for photos or whatever you want. Just a thought.
Well, and it again, a different way to accomplish the same task.
Mhm.
Or use a cork tube. Yeah, I use cork tubes for all kinds of stuff. Especially for monitors, it's really big for me.
Oh, right.
And but it's all it is a visual barrier and security because they
Mhm.
want to feel something and brush on their shoulders. That's the
Mhm.
accomplishment. Well, the part that
Yep.
sucks is I have really cool monitors that I paid a lot of money for, and I never see them except for their tail or their snout. And
Right. Right.
it's just a different way to accomplish the same goal.
Right. No, it absolutely
That's
is. Um, and that's that's
and
that's
I
why that's why I said disservice. It's just that um, it's a shame because the reality is we're all still learning. We're all just trying to do it right. I don't know many people who, whether they ask a dumb question, and I say that based on the judgments people will make, or whether they did a dumb thing. And the reality is, I don't know many people that have gotten an animal and intentionally done something to hurt it. It's just not.
Yes,
Most
right.
people are trying their best.
Absolutely. Yes. And it, yeah, that, so, so my wife and I do educational shows. And
Okay.
this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, both days, we had like festival type events. And
Okay.
it's always there. You'll get like one or two people that might know some stuff. But it's
Mhm.
always just like 600 people that have no idea, you know, and, but they're really excited, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
on my end, you know, I've been doing it for like 20 years. I have a crazy number of animals and read a gajillion books and all this different stuff. And like, I
Mhm.
have to, I have to like say that in my head, you know, of they really do want to know. They
Mhm.
genuinely don't know that. You
Right.
know, and it, whenever like through the rescue or through different things, when I talk to people who are new owners or you see people at Tinley and it's their first lizard or whatever, and
Right.
it, yeah, none of them come at it from a bad place, you know, and it, and they ask
Mhm.
something, and you get people that
Yeah.
are like, oh my god, you're totally going to kill it because you don't even know how to buy a heat lamp or whatever silly thing the person didn't know, and it's like,
Right.
yeah, yes, that's frustrating to talk to someone who doesn't know
Right.
like about a light bulb, but but like they
For sure.
they're asking, you know, they didn't
Yeah.
spend $300 on a gecko with the idea of putting it in their fridge later on. Like that's not they want
Right.
it to live in their house with them. They just don't know how to do it,
Mhm.
you know.
Right.
But
But
yeah, man,
um,
it is hard though when you're like, all right, you're the 75th person that I have to tell
mhm.
about a water bottle. Like, you know, and I
But
get it. I do understand that it can be very overwhelming. But yeah, I mean,
right.
they are all coming from a good place.
But on the flip side, I will say this, and I wish my wife could be here because you'd see her face light up and her head nodding yes, because yeah. But I'll tell you right now, there is nothing more. There's nothing I'd put more money on than the 11, 13-year old that does know their stuff. I have had
Oh yeah.
days where I have these rare. I mean, I remember one time it was one of those days when I was like just putting everything out and going, okay, this is who I am because it was a show I hadn't done before, and so I brought everything. You know, I actually it was my Gonosaurus langlanensis, the cave geckos, but a little bit more of a rare one. And have everything out there, and you know, all day long, you get these grown-ups, kind of like you said, the ones that do know a little bit. They, you know, these grown-ups go, oh yeah, that's one of those, da, 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 and they want to tell you what they know, and they know a decent amount, okay? And I'm like, that's cool, you know? And then all of a sudden, I just hear this high-pitched shrieking, they have Lagodactylus lugubrus! Mom, these are parthenogenetic! And I'm going, it sounds like a 7-year-old. And I turn and look, and it's a kid. It turns out he was like 11, but he's like, oh my gosh, are these blangs? And I'm going, blangs? He even knows the slang for these guys. You know, I'm like, okay, yeah, yeah. He's like, Dad, and you know, like the kid starts talking to his dad. His dad's like, I've never even heard of these. And I looked at the dad because the dad's looking at me going, those aren't cheap. And I'm going, yeah, they're pretty exotic. And he's like, I don't know. And then the kid just starts reeling. No, as long as you take care of them, they live alongside. They don't live in the caves. They often are seen outside the caves by a stream, and they want their humidity in their mud. And he's just going and going and going. And his dad ended up putting out the money. I actually ended up knocking it down quite a bit because this kid blew my mind. But the dad put out the money. He walks away, and I looked at my wife and I said, he's going to breed those things. Mark my words. Wouldn't you know it? Like, it was like 3 years later, but sure enough, Artificer Geckos gets this message on Facebook of pictures of this kid with babies. He had bred them, and it was really kind of cool. These are also the things that I think a lot of people don't realize they're missing if they don't go to the shows and support people at the shows. But this kid literally started coming every year. I met who I believe now is his wife, but at the time was his girlfriend, who he was saying was going to be his fiance. I met this kid when he was 11. He had grown up, he was, I want to say he
Yeah.
was in his 20s at this point. But it was funny because back then I knew. I was like, if I had to bet all my geckos on any person who bought something from me today, short of maybe a couple of the vendors, that kid was going to breed those geckos. And sure enough, he did. Because you could tell he was one of those people that just based on what he knew, he was going home and not just reading Facebook. He was reading the stuff where you learn the Latin names. He was reading the habitat, the
For sure.
everything. I mean, he just knew. And to me, those are the ones that make it so worth it. Because you're just like, you know what, that kid's going to be, when I'm too old to do this, that kid's probably going to have a website and a Facebook page or whatever the equivalent is, some virtual tour of his reptile room. And I'm going to be going there going, yes, he's still doing it. And look at this. I never got to do these, So, it balances out. You get your wins where you can, I guess.
For sure. Yeah. Those are the parts of public events that I really love showing and teaching people that don't know. And it's awesome, and exposing them to it and, hey, these are cool and so on and so forth. But yeah, when you get the one-off that rolls up and there's a kid, we do a big charity event for a zoo every year. We've gone for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And he's early 20s. He's on the spectrum and he always comes with his dad. And he comes up to me and the stuff that he says, I'm like, I might have to look that up, but yeah, I think that's right. Way, and dude, the same way, his parents help him with stuff and things.
Right.
And, but they keep some crazy stuff, and it's, yeah. And he's like, oh yeah. One of my friends was fortunate enough that he had a Borneo earless monitors, and of course, crazy expensive, so on and so forth. And 800 people walked by that day and thought they were weird salamanders, and I was making fun of him,
right?
Because we were setting up before the show, and I knew those cost crazy money, and I was like, dude, I was so glad he brought them because I'd never handled them, and I got to mess with them, and it was awesome for me. But I'm a nerd, and
right.
I was
I understand that.
A bunch of people here are going to walk by and they're not going to know what it is, and I was giving him a hard time, and so he was getting frustrated, because it was happening, and he was like, "For people, I brought this for a zoo. They don't even know. Yeah, these are really expensive, And he's getting upset, and the kid came. And I was like, hey, dude, did you go to the table over there? They got Borneo earless. And he was like, oh, they're from the place. And this is what they do. And it's losing it and knew what they were. Goes over to the table and is the first person. We've been there for 4 hours. And he was he was the first person to roll up and be like, I know what this is. This is really important. And he's telling his dad how, all about palm oil and all the crazy stuff. And everybody at that table that was working that event, that was their pick-me-up for the day of, oh, so it was worth it for us to do this because that dude knew.
And that one thing does. There are times where that does it for you. That one person who actually gets excited. Yeah. Because it's just, there were times where it was, I'm not going to lie, it gets a little discouraging sometimes when you're sitting there and you're going, okay, I have these geckos that, some of the guys that I know from the East or Tinley, that direction would just kill for, times where I get something that I know that the people out in Pomona would kill for, and I'm up in Sacramento, and everybody's looking at it and has no clue, and they go and buy the little, whatever. I don't like to target animals, but you know what I'm getting at. They go for the one that the last 20 people bought too, and you just kind of feel like that, and sometimes all you need is that one person who at least recognizes what they're looking at for so, but I mean, it comes and goes in phases. There was a time when I could not sell a gargoyle gecko, and I mean a red. I could not sell one at a show for $75. There was a time, and I mean, right next to me, and next to me, my friend was selling crested geckos for $100 a pop, and that was cheap, but all day long. And I'm going, but these are red. Back then, they hadn't even mastered the I'll call it mutations, whatever you want to call it, on the morphs on the Cresties. So they were both pretty plain, but the Gargos were more red than anything, and it was driving me nuts, you know. So everything comes and goes in phases, I guess. So you're always going to have that really cool animal that other people don't recognize as decent at all.
See, but that works against me though, because we do the shows, and I also have a fairly extensive collection, and whenever I tell my wife, I'm like, oh hey, there's this like super cool thing, and I want to get it, and so on and so forth. Like that's always her answer is, well, when you're teaching a lesson, could you teach that lesson with an animal that costs $50 instead of an animal that costs $500? And I'm like, yeah, I could, but it wouldn't be nearly as cool. And you know, but she always has me, you know, where she's like, well, you're teaching about camouflage. Do you really need $1,000 snake to teach about camouflage? Yes, I do. You know, and it's like, well, no, I could use a garter snake. That's no big, you know, I can't like justify that, but I don't want to justify it. I want to get it because it's cool. Yeah, man, it's that's a hard one where, you know, I do still have some rarer or weirder stuff in the collection, and to do the lessons or whatever, and you know, it's always some little kids, so you can't actually get mad at them. And you know, I'll bring some, you know, I have a couple of different monitor lizards and some different things, and they're always like, is that an iguana? And I'm like, dude, it's not even green. It's not even green, kid. It's also so much cooler than an iguana and way more money. And you know, but he's 6. You can't actually throw the lizard at him, even though you want to. Yeah.
Oh, if I when I was first doing the Saracenorum, they really, I mean, on the West Coast, Saras came even later than on the East. I noticed that right away, just based on the trip to Tinley versus the West. Oh yeah, they weren't as common, and definitely not the white collars. But I'll tell you, those were probably one of the most frustrating animals when I first was breeding and selling them. I was at a show, and I can even tell you it was the San Jose show. I remember this, like, because it was just frustrating to all Hades. But people kept thinking they were Cresties because the collar, you know, you get, especially the teenagers, the young teenagers, they're not really paying attention. They don't know too much, but I mean, and I remember being this way too in high school. They want to talk like they know what they're talking about. So, you know, a kid would go, oh, look at this one. And the other cooler kid would be like, oh, that's a Cresty. They're everywhere. We don't want them. And they walk off. And you just kind of want to go, can I just grab you by your collar, bring you back here and go, look closer, it's not. You know? That San Jose show, that happened. I am not joking. The not rude, but whatever you want to call it, where it's like, oh, that's just a Cresty, and they walk away. That happened at least 3 or 4 times that weekend. And at least a dozen times someone went, oh, that's an interesting looking Cresty. Is that a hybrid? Is that a, you know, and I'm going, it's not a Cresty, I swear. So yeah, you know, it's just it is what it is.
See, my only hope for the karma of the universe is that, like, when stuff like that happens, that, you know, 2 years later, when the marketplace bursts for those things, I just hope that person has the light bulb and is like, oh, I could have got it for 30% of the price. Oh man.
Oh yeah.
I told that dude it was a crested. Oh, you know, I just have to hope that happens.
Yeah. Oh, it happens. I mean, well, it happens at least amongst the vendors, because I can tell you, there's one vendor that, you know, the funny thing is sometimes it's the names that make people think something's worthy or not. The name of who takes it. So, like, one time, I had, gosh, I want to say I had like 8 pairs of gargoyles, like not adult, but ready to breed. Adult, ready to breed, not old. And they were just beautiful, right? And a friend of mine, no, I won't say the name because I just don't want to get mad, but I was saying, look, dude, if you want them, he was a vendor, and I said, if you want them, man, it's gonna kill me. I'll go $150 a pair. And he was like, you know, I just don't know that they're gonna sell well. Well, just by chance, Frank, the one who spoke here, comes walking up at the end of the show. As that same person's back at my booth, goes, "How'd you do?" I think he might have been wondering if maybe he was gonna try to offer me less or something. I don't know. But Frank walked up and said, "I want them all," and just bought me out of them. And immediately after that, this guy, we'll call him A, started to just like every show would hit me up. This is what he'd do every time. You got anything like the gargoyle, something cool, something new? So they remember.
Yep.
I'll tell you this. They remember. And what was funny is he didn't have any interest until Frank took him. Which,
For sure.
I mean, I think that's it's smart that Frank knows his stuff. But I'm also like, dude, you got to go with what you like. The best you're ever gonna do if you just look at what they're doing is you're only gonna do what they do. And so I've had a lot of really amazing people that have been so helpful when I needed to catch up. Because when I first dived back into this, it was just such a different world. And I'm just thankful for, and a lot of them are actually out your direction. They might not live there, but like a lot of the people that do the Tinley show, a lot of those guys were big time helpers because I was trying to do the rarer stuff. And in California, because of how dry and hot it was up where I lived, you didn't have very many people with a lot of good insight on for example, a Fantastica, a Satanic, or
Right.
some of these more tropical. So it's amazing to me. Some people will say that the internet's brutal, and some will say that it's helpful. I honestly think it balances itself out because for every jerk I mean a Joe Hub, for
Oh
whatever the
yeah,
case.
absolutely.
So I can't complain.
Well, and
I
that's
just
like I've told people even about doing the podcast. Like I follow tons and bunches of different lizard people for all sorts of different things, and like other than the first few episodes where I was basically cheating, just interviewing people that I knew, so I didn't sound like an idiot. Um, all the rest of them are straight up like I just message people and I'm like, hey, I really like what you do. I think it's cool. Like, do you want to come hang out and talk about it? And it's that easy. Like, it's a very cool community, and especially like I go to Tinley all the time. Like
I'm
that.
jealous, but go on.
Yeah. But like, it's, you see in like Facebook posts and stuff, people talk about going to Bananas, the bar and restaurant thing after or whatever. And like, that's why that's a thing. Like, that's why it's cool to do that, is because everybody goes and hangs out. Like, they're all, not all, because it's people, but for the most part, yeah, man, people are just cool about it. And then yes, you do get like the randos on Facebook that say crazy things in a Facebook group or whatever. And then I turn around and I message somebody, I don't know you. And I was like, oh yeah, I want to talk about gecko nerd stuff. What do you think? And it's like, oh yeah, that's cool. And it's so, yeah, it definitely balances out in the, well, it sounds kind of bad, but like people that count, I guess. Like there's tons of faceless people floating through social media saying crazy things, and I will never interact with them ever again. And then the handful of people that I do interact with, and then the other handful of people I interact with at a show or at an event or a fundraiser or whatever, like those people count. And yeah, it's just, you do notice that at the shows, I think, a lot more, in that I'm really grateful that we can do so much online and buy and sell things and get stuff, and it's really cool. It gives way more people accessibility that live in parts of the country that don't have like a lot of shows and stuff. But man, to be able to be in that community part, like you do see a lot of stuff, kind of like you were saying, of at the end of the show day, and somebody's like, oh, hey, I got one of these, but I couldn't find one of those. And you'll see somebody at a table that's like, look, man, $50 or whatever, like, just buy my dinner. I don't care. Like, there's a lot more, there's a lot more handshake kind of stuff. In that part of the community. I think that's super cool.
Yeah. No, I have a couple of friends that we don't even bother anymore with the pricing. We literally have like this whole I don't know what to call it, but like to give you an idea of one of the people I'm thinking of, at the last show, he needed a white collar female, Sarah. I was like, just take it. I already owed you for the day geckos you gave me last show, and we just keep
Right.
doing that back and forth. And
There's a checklist somewhere. Whatever.
Yeah, and it just kind of goes that way, and I honestly love that because I feel like and mind you, I know some people do it for a living, and I will never ever have a problem with that. I just when I come across someone who's doing it and wants to trade like that, there's this little tiny part of me that goes, okay, you're doing it for the reason I am. You're doing it.
Sure.
You're doing the money part to help, but it's to help support your addiction and see what you can do and how many you can get. And so, and those are the people that I'll gravitate to. I can't help them because that.
See, and I think that like, that goes back to your postings and stuff where you talk about the old school thing. In that, I think that mentality has a root in that stuff because that they weren't worth any money back then, and especially well, when you were talking about, original herpetoculture was native stuff. So you literally were just some guy catching it. And there wasn't a whole lot of value. And then even for someone like yourself who had exposure to the import side, when you are the person that imports it, or if you have access to an importer where on like a friend basis, not on a business basis, right? The imported things are super cheap. Also really hard to take care of. So that's there's a trade-off there, but it kind of starts, it colors how you interact with things. It colors your opinions of, well, I understand the value of captive bred now, so I'm okay with spending more money for some things because I know the work that goes into it. But the flip to that is, I know these are really cheap and we just kind of hang out and think they're cool. So like, can you slide me some frogs and I'll slide you some lizards? And same. It makes that a little easier because you kind of saw behind the curtain a little bit,
Right. And, it's funny because I remember some of the tricks that I learned working for this guy as a kid. He'd get these ambanja, and it was the ambanja, not the amylobes, but the ambanja panther chameleons that he was getting in. And a lot of times they'd be dehydrated because these were coming from overseas. They'd come in and
for sure.
And his most stubborn, aggressive ones, he would actually take grapes that he just rinsed, and he would put them on a little. It wasn't a skewer because it was softer. I want to say it was like almost like a stir that you use like for coffee, but it was made of like it's something I don't see anymore. And he would bring it up come up towards the chameleon. When the chameleon gaped at him, he put the grape right there and it would take the grape and chomp it. Sure, I mean, this is times where I told you I might slip. I caught myself, but sure as when the chameleon would start getting its hydration. Just some crazy things. But I know I'm glad. I love talking about this with people, and honestly, I love talking about it even just one-on-one. I've talked with a couple of people. But Joe's definitely one of the biggest ones guilty of this. But sometimes we have talked till like 4:00 in the morning, and we started at like 10.
I have that.
Just talking.
That problem too.
So I mean, I love doing it, and anytime if you ever want to chat, just let me know, live or not. But I'll tell you this: it's going to be way more exciting in here, probably in a few more months. Right now, everything's literally on a rack and just kind of. It's not my style. My style is to have it feel more jungle-ish in here.
For sure.
And there's so many cool things that now that we're talking and you've said a few things, I wish I'd known I could have kind of brought them up, because I can tell you there's a couple of stories. I worked actually with a lot of highly functioning autistic kids. Awesome. I would bring them to the shows for free. I'd work with the vendor, the people running the shows, and I would just say, hey, look, is it cool if I bring 8 kids? They aren't, these aren't really customers. They're just gonna, because one of my friends had worked with them like for school and on a grant this was their field trip.
Yeah.
And some of the stories I could tell you that I've seen of, I've come to this true mindset that there are certain children who are autistic, and of course, with a lot of the autism comes an element of OCD.
Yep.
And those kids are literally designed, it seems mostly for snakes, but for reptiles.
Yes.
Because of the way those reptiles learn patterns.
Yes.
And the way the kids keep patterns.
Yep.
But I could tell you some crazy, heartwarming stories that I've seen with the kids with that. Just fun times, But,
but one of the schools that we do every year is just a variety of kids that have all sorts of diagnoses. But it's like some of those diagnoses on the spectrum where, people always think of autism and Asperger's and things like that, and how what makes those kids different is that they interact with us differently. And that's how it becomes really obvious, is that they struggle in conversation or something like that. And but that's at least what I've found but that's also why people like reptiles, right? Reptiles are so weird compared to mammals and people, and they do all this different stuff. And then, man, I'm telling you, to get a room full of people who are different and then to find animals that are different, like, it's really awesome to watch them start to jive, because it makes sense to them. That they might struggle with interactions with us because that doesn't make sense to them. But that's also the same reason that this snake doesn't get it and thinks you're just a tree branch or some weird monkey because they don't get it. And then, to see those two things come together, it's super cool. Yeah, for sure.
And I'll tell you this, one thing I've learned from working with both of them is that they both might be different than how I am, but both of them can really easily make you think that they're not interested and not paying attention to you. And they're aware of every single thing you're saying.
Yes.
The reptile might not understand it, but believe me, I've learned that some of my geckos, they know my tone. As corny as it sounds, if I talk in this goofy voice I use when it's feeding time, they recognize it. They know I'm about to drop the Pangea or the crickets, whatever. So,
my wife is.
I've learned so much from both.
Oh, for sure. My wife is very into bigger lizards. She monitors and tegus and things like that. But she's also a mom, so she has like a mom tone, and yeah, for sure. Like I have 100% seen tegus just like a dog stop and look at her like, I think I might have screwed up. I think I might have screwed up right there. Like I might have made a mistake.
We have a lychee. We have a lychee that's the opposite here. I have a lychee that it loves Misty. It loves her. And I mean, it can be in its hide. And if she starts doing this little, Cleany boy, Cleany, do you want some nana? He'll pop his head out. Before you see his head, you'll see the tongue. He'll pop his head out. He'll look at her waiting for whatever she's going to give him. It knows, right? But it goes a step further than that. Not only does it know its happy voice, he knows my voice. And he doesn't hate me. It's like he knows I'm dad or whatever. But he literally has like this "you're not my mom" attitude where me can be misting him, misting, and he'll be sitting there lapping some up, grabbing it, and I'll go, okay, my turn, and I'll do it, and he will literally stop lapping, look at me, and not run, walk into his hide like, screw you, buddy, and just gone. And he will do it I have done that on video. I say this a lot. I do a TikTok, and so on my TikTok, I'll record those kinds of goofy things going on.
For sure.
But I've caught that so many times where he's just like, he loves her, but if I come around, it's like, it's not like hate and it's not fear. It's just, you're not relevant, dude.
They know the difference. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So they definitely choose favorites. So yeah, fun times. And I just gotta throw this out there because you were mentioning earlier, the people like the bigger lizards and you were saying why is it I like the smaller ones. One thing I gotta tell you is like right now, I really do think that one of my favorite, if I'm removing the rarities and all these different things, although these are still kind of rare, but if I'm removing all that collector mentality things, and I go with one of my favorites right now is the chameleon geckos, the agricoli. And
Cool.
I'll tell you why. This is the one of those little kind of leads into what I was saying earlier about different quirks or things about them that make them different. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, a little bit. Yes.
Okay. So for those that aren't aware, these guys are tiny and they have the ability, a lot of people don't realize it, but they have the ability to spew something from their tail if they feel threatened or don't like you. And it's just not fun smelling stuff. It's almost like a musk from a snake. And there are even reports of some people have said it feels like fiberglass. If you touch fiberglass, you get the itch for a little while, and then it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
But, excuse me one second. Sorry. Should have brought water. But you have this lizard that looks like a little micro leech. They're chubby, they're goofy, like little sausages. It's probably about yay big. That not only can you just pick up, and it's not going to do that to you. It's not going to lose it. It's not going to squirt you. It's not going to freak out. They can change colors. Half the time, mine don't even change colors. But they'll come to you. Like, and this is, once again, on the TikToks, I've done it. But when it's Pangea night, and I've done this on purpose, make sure that the first take I go to, so it's not that they smell it. I go there. I open the door. They know the timing, and they are literally willing to run up my hand if they think they can get to it first. And then once they're on me, they're not freaking out. They're just relaxing. What makes me like them is the fact that this is an animal that has the ability to do something defensive to you. So for me, the fact that they're not releasing anything from their tail, the fact that they're not flaring up, the fact that they are literally just chilling, that's what hooks me on some of the species. It's the fact that you have an animal that could do something, but it's cool with you. It really is like, okay, you're not a threat, and I'm not. And I just love that about some of the
Lets
animals.
you know you're doing the right thing.
Exactly. There's something amazing about it. So many geckos, the reality is that they can't do anything except for gape maybe, and a lot of them won't even gape. They'll just freeze up and hold still because they're scared. And you have this little guy and I've had it done, but I'll tell you, the only time it's happened to me was at a show when I had how it is at the show. I pull out an animal this big and there's like 35 people all hunched over looking at it going, ooh, and it it literally lost its poo, if you will, except for out of its tail.
Right.
Where it was scared. So these animals can do it when they're scared. They can do it when they feel threatened, and yet they're just like, okay, pick me up, whatever. And so I like that element too.
For sure. I mean, it's an instant answer,
Right.
This is what happens if it's a bad thing. It didn't happen.
Right.
We're okay. Yeah. I mean, that's the real response, I suppose.
And I think for a lot of us, it's the goal you can't ever fully achieve. I think for a lot of us that are in it for the love of the animals, we just want to know that the animal knows we're not trying to kill it. We're not trying to hurt it. You know what I mean? There's something, and in so many cases, you'll never know. Does it even have a clue that you're anything more than a different person every day? I've seen enough to tell me probably they know, but you'll never get that full answer that you just wish you could, just for one day, be able to interview your animals and say, so rate me. How am I doing? What do you think? Or whatever.
Yeah, no,
so that's
there is always a part of people that everyone will always want the dog response,
right?
Even if I only get it one time,
right?
Yeah. Just rub your head on me or something, or let me know that we're cool, and then you can just ignore me forever. But we're cool that time,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because
absolutely.
it's something that's familiar to you that you we can perceive as a positive response, you know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you just have a way better chance of it happening, I feel like, with lizards than with snakes or the other animals you can really
Oh, I would
interact with in
agree.
the hobby.
I would agree.
And I also think that that's probably why you're always going to have your camps of what people think is cool and what they like, and it's always going to have at least a little bit of basis in that, because they are pets for most people. You know, most people don't have a giant collection. They have one or two or three, you know, of I have 3 geckos, you know, one a desert one and a tree one and a water one, or whatever your tiny collection is, or just one. I've had one leopard gecko for 10 years, you know, and if that is your level of involvement in herpetoculture, and you don't have a whole lot of species exposure for other things, then you have no idea. And so all of your focus is stuck right here, where it's like, oh, well, you know, that thing never like walked to me. It didn't, you know, like smile or do the positive thing. So I feel like I didn't do a good job, you know?
Right.
And
yeah. Well, and I think that's for me, that's another factor I think in the geckos that I keep, is that a lot of the geckos that I keep, one, kind of like you said, some of them you just don't handle. I mean, you don't want to handle them. And I think I can handle 99% of my geckos at this point that I've had at least for 2 years that would I don't handle them because they're breeding naturally. They're having babies naturally in the tanks and not losing, you know. So I'm just real careful about that. But to me, the trade-off is this, and this is just from someone, because I did do snakes for a little while, especially when I was working for that guy. I was obsessed with the snakes. But it's kind of funny what you said earlier about the prices. I mean, I got a Dumerals boa. Now, this is back in like 1981 for $2 in credit, because he would give me credit for helping him. But yeah, a Dumerals boa, it was decent size. It was at least 2.5 feet. It was beautiful, and it was, you know, not even $50 for the thing. But what I've come to realize, what I've come to realize is the snakes, to me, are, and of course there's no such thing as universal, but by and large, the snakes to me are more of this is the pet you're going to want to hold, and you can hold it for quite a while if you get like a ball python or whatever, and it's typically going to be chill. The trade-off to me with the geckos, and as I became more busy in my life, the geckos I get more benefit from, is I don't hold them much. I don't have the time to hold them all the time and make sure they always realize I'm a friend or whatever. But a lot of the gecko species I keep that aren't mainstream are out all the time. Like during the day, they're not hiding. You know, they're active. There's some of these guys are so noisy. It's annoying when I'm doing my lives on the TikTok. And so, you know, there's a trade-off for everything. Your snake, to me, is the ultimate. I mean, I have a friend who she treats it like a hair bun thingy at the show, and it's content to stay there all day because she's nice and warm. And the show, I don't know how Tinley does, because I haven't vended there, but I know the show's on the West Coast. Whenever we would go, if you got there early enough, it was still freezing in there on that Friday. It was not warm. So she just put it in her hair, and it's totally content to be right there. And you're not typically going to get that. There's like maybe 5 geckos I have 5 species I have that'll let you do that if you're working with them. I have a couple that I can literally keep on my hat all day at a show. But for the most part, you're not going to get that. But what you will get is you'll get to see all the activity. You'll get to see. You're never going to look at the tank and it's just this thing, just, you know, like a snake when it's just chilling, sleeping, or sunning. You know, you're going to get a lot more. I'll call it speed. And it really comes down to, what do you want? And, you know, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, because I'll tell you, there are snakes. I love my tricolor. I love it. I love that snake. She's got attitude, but it's all bark. And I love her. I'm sorry. I was going to say the Malagasy cat eye snakes are the other ones I have, and I love them. They're super cute. There are a few snakes that will, if I go up to the tank and I'm doing like this, looking at the tank, they really will kind of stretch their head out and come look at you like, "What are you doing, man? Why are you staring at me?" You know, they're a little more personal than the majority of the snakes that I've kept. But by and large, it seems like the lizards, including the monitors, because I've only had a couple, but I've like to give you an idea. One of them was an Asian water.
Okay.
They do seem to definitely recognize you, and I won't say put on a show because it's not intentional, but they do get active if they know you're watching them a little bit. They get kind of curious as to why you're watching them.
Right.
Same with the tigers. And you just don't get as much of that from the snakes. The snakes are more like, okay, I see you. I'm going to sit here and hope you leave me alone. You know?
Yeah.
So,
yep. For sure.
Every once in a while, I will see a mind-blowing exception. One of my friends tamed his green tree python to the extent that at the show, it was sitting on a stick that was part of his cat's cat tree with the cat in the tree, and both of them didn't care. And like the snake was so tame, but this snake was like in his pocket as a baby growing up. They probably went through abuse if you want to know the truth, in the sense that he cared so much, that over caring thing. But this snake was so tame, it blew my mind. It is probably the only snake I've ever seen where if somebody walked up with a dog, I wouldn't be like, "Stay 5 feet back." It might strike at the dog thinking it's food, you know. Which happened in California multiple times. I don't know if it ever happens at Tinley.
No, not really, but it happened to me today.
Really?
That's always a huge thing at public shows is, you know, folks walking their dog or whatever, and I'm sitting on the ground with a 13-foot berm, and they like, they'll literally they're walking straight at me, and I'm like, "Hey, don't stop, don't," and they're like, "What?" Right. And then you could see the thought process where, like, it always starts out where somehow they think I'm being rude or something.
Right.
Like, why is this man telling me no? What is happening?
Yeah.
And then they look down, they're like, "Oh, he's sitting with a giant snake." I'm like, "Yeah, and you have a schnauzer. Yeah. What are you doing?" Like, oh yeah.
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 Oh yeah. No, there was it was interesting because and I gotta say they handled it well, but one of the people that runs the shows on the West Coast, they I want to say it was the last year before COVID, put out an announcement telling all the vendors, "We're sorry, no dogs. We don't care if they're your service dogs, if they're your comfort animals. The answer is no." And people were losing their minds because, well, first of all, it's California, and we're always looking for a reason in California to lose our minds. But then it came out. What happened was somebody literally went up to the retic, of all things, the reticulated, with their chihuahua, said, "Look, Bookie." And the retic said, "Oh, I'm looking. Let me show you how hard," and grabbed it by the my understanding is the dog lived, but the person was trying to sue the venue. And so because of that, they laid down the law about the dogs. You know? So yeah, it's crazy. But at any rate, I don't know like how long we can or are supposed to talk.
We are just over an hour 40. So we will wrap up this episode. Okay. Before we wrap up, I would like to ask two things. One, is there anything, I know you were talking about moving and getting stuff set up and doing different things now. Is there anything you are currently looking to add to your menagerie that you don't have right now?
Kind of ironic. What I'm trying to do at this point, because I'm rebuilding, is I'm trying to add a couple more female Saracenorums, which is, I say ironic because that was the one at the show but when I moved here, I downsized quite a bit because I had a bunch of eggs, and the ones that hatched are all male. So
of course.
Yeah. And I'm actually really on the alert for lizards at this point. I'm trying to get a hold of a few more of the diurnal climbing lizards, because that's been my latest obsession. And I don't know, I think it's the false chameleons have got me going. I'm trying to find a pair of porpoise, which is the small false chameleons, but in general, I'm really loving the lizards that climb the trees.
Very cool.
I think it's because my geckos all climb the glass. It's kind of nice
Okay.
to see something actually running around up and down the trees all the time, you know.
Right, and if you're going to put the effort in for all that nice enclosure, you want somebody to put it to use.
Right. So yeah, I'm just on the rebuilding. I kind of hit that point where when I'm really rebuilding, I've made enough friends that usually I go to them, but I'm always
Okay.
looking for something unique. Always looking for something unique. And I am always willing to do trades as long as people are like I guess what I want to say here is I'm not dumb. Sometimes people want to give you like their retail trade value for your wholesale trade value.
Right.
You
That's one of those like,
that,
just be cool, man.
exactly.
If you need someone to explain to you what it means to like just be cool, you're probably not being cool. Like that's
right.
that's kind of that's
yeah.
That's
yeah. You
yeah,
nailed it.
that's a vibe. And the second question is, where can folks find you?
I am everywhere. You can find me on. To be honest with you, probably the best places if you just want to see just the geckos I keep would be Facebook. That would be the Artificer Geckos page. Probably would want to spell that one out in the description.
Yep, I will.
I do a lot of videos on TikTok. The only thing I would say about that is keep in mind, and I do lives on TikTok. And when I'm live on TikTok, I have my phone. And the one cool thing about this, and I'm actually talking to you, buddy. The one cool about this is that with my phone, if you ever want to see something, I can literally be like, "Oh yeah, come here, check it out," and I'll take the phone and go right up to whatever enclosure. So if people are asking me, "Hey, how did you set up this tank?" I can say, "Well, let me show you the phone. I'll take it down to the lower, and I'll see that layer. That layer is your sphagnum moss. That layer is your blah blah blah. This is how I did it." So it's really kind of neat that way. But the warning is that TikTok for me is a release. It's not a business. It's not even a reptile hobby. It is everything. So when I'm live, I'm always willing to show somebody animals, and if they have a question, I'm willing to tell them. But I might be toasting somebody with a shot, or I might be, you know what I mean? It's just I'm in contact with. Well, the good thing is that's where a lot of the reptile people that come in are my friends. They are people that we have worked together or we have traded or whatever. So it's a great
actual personal stuff.
It is. But because it's TikTok and it's videos, every once in a while I might play a prank on my wife or whatever. It's never dirty, but I'm just saying you're not just going to see reptiles. I guess that's what I would tell people. And my name on TikTok is Alimony. The O is a 0. So it's Alimony, ALIM0NY. And it's a fun place. And like I said, that's probably where you'd see the most, only because Facebook freaks out about everything. I've tried to put some of these videos. I used to try to share them to both, and Facebook would go, "We're detecting music, and we don't know if it's copyrighted." And I'm going, "It's not copyrighted. It's free license because it's part of a membership I'm in. I know." But they shut everything down. So it's not that I don't want to share it on my Artificer Gecko page. It's that they won't let me. So I just started using TikTok more because the video you can capture everything, and I've managed to get enough followers. I like calling them friends, but whatever, on TikTok that I'm allowed to do 3-minute videos. Most TikTokers can only do 1.
Oh, cool.
So it's kind of cool because I literally have enough time to squeeze in a build real quick or to give a real quick all about a certain species on it. So
for sure.
Either way,
That's
I'm
awesome.
always willing to answer questions too, by all means, always. So
very cool.
Yeah.
When I post the episode, I will make sure to put that in the notes. That's awesome.
Thank you. And like I said, anytime you want to chat, by all means, more than willing. Can I throw out one quick shout out just in case anybody from the West Coast happens to see this?
Absolutely.
If you're on the West, if you've done Pomona, you've done San Diego, whatever, Sacramento, do San Jose this year, guys. Visit it. I'm not talking about the vendors. They're probably already booked. I just want people to know San Jose's reptile show has grown to be, in my opinion, as big, maybe even a little bigger than Pomona. It's huge. Check it out.
Wow.
Had to say it. I had to. It's growing, and I wasn't telling people because I wasn't vending it, or because I was vending it. But I'm over here now. I can't go do it anyways. I might as well tell everybody it's growing like crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a good show. Well, it's by Silicon Valley, so it's a really good show. You get a lot of people there that are there to buy. You get a lot of people there that kind of like you said earlier, have the money to understand and have built their way to know that skink is worth that much. It's not,
Right.
A little bit less of the looky. So, yeah,
for sure.
But thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm out here in Georgia. I've got like 3 friends, so it's great to have a conversation with a human being.
Yeah, it's always cool. Like, I always get worried a little bit where I see people doing cool stuff, and then I'm like, hey, you have no idea who I am, but I think we could talk to each other having never met in front of other people. It'll be great. I've been really fortunate that so far it has. But yeah, man, it was awesome. I'm glad that I don't really know how to say this. I'm glad the real you is as cool as the social media you. Because that is, I think that's something that maybe you run it, because I had read the postings of like you like old school stuff and things like that, and I was like, yes, that's my kind of person. And then there's always that chance that you meet him and they're like, yeah, I just wrote that for Facebook. That's but yeah, it was awesome.
That's kind of why I warn people about the TikTok thing, is because TikTok, a lot of it is voice acting. So you will somebody who has nothing but really funny jokes, but none of them are their jokes, and none of them. I mean, imagine if Facebook was all video. Every meme that somebody said might or might not be their words. It might be someone else's. So that's why I mentioned that. I said you might jump in on the first video you see is me, I don't know, saying something off the wall. If it's said in humor, it's a joke. It's all part of the, whatever. But I really do probably go at least 50% of my videos are reptiles. But what I was getting at is Facebook, you get a little bit of a sense. On TikTok, you just don't know. And believe me when I say I've gone live and had people come in and I'm just going, you are not the person I thought you. I'm not even sure you are the person. I'm not sure you're anything you said you were. I'm not sure you're in the country I thought you were. I'm not sure. I mean, like, just so many different things that you're just going, this doesn't add up. So I feel you.
Those things become much more obvious when you can see the interaction and, it's a big deal.
One of these days, if you ever get on it, let me know. I need to pull you in with me because I can dual live too. We can both go live, and I'll just tell everybody to go follow your show.
I will figure that out.
All righty.
Cool.
Thanks for having me. You've been awesome, by the way. This has been just fun, natural, happy.
I'm glad. Thanks for doing it.
Take care.
See ya. All right. That was episode 14. Ian of Artificer Geckos. That was super cool. I'm really glad I got to talk to him. And like I said, it's really cool to find these folks through social media, and they're the people I actually follow and the stuff that I enjoy seeing, and they're successful, and I want to share that with folks, and then to have a face-to-face conversation with them, even though of course it's over the internet, and find out that they are genuinely the cool person that I thought they were, and are good people doing good stuff. I don't know, it's really reassuring. It's really awesome. I encourage you guys, if you use TikTok, to go check his out. It sounds like a good time. I use TikTok under the Coal Black Exotics name, but I'm not very good at it. It's usually me and my kids posting funny videos. So I will try to get more involved with that because he sounds like it would be a really fun time. I know we had talked earlier. I think he does a lot of that at nighttime. So maybe that'll be something cool. And what else is there? We are obviously out of the loop. This was off schedule. But we're back on schedule. So next Sunday we'll have another one, and then so on and so forth every 2 weeks. Hopefully, obviously things change with scheduling. Ian was super cool, and we were able to reset it up just a week later. So that's no big deal. Um, don't forget that Lizard Brain Radio is now a part of the Herpeticulture Network. I'm really excited to be a part of that with those guys. Some of the folks who are Snakes and Stogies and Herpeticulture Network and Herpeticulture Magazine regulars are going to be at Tinley, which isn't in Tinley this year. It's in Schaumburg, Illinois, but it's coming up here in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to get to see some of them. That's going to be awesome. And it sounds like the Herpeticulture Network group, folks that are either on shows or regulars in the comments and things like I was before the podcast joined the network. It sounds like Daytona is the place to be, that folks are trying to get down there. And obviously quite a few of the folks in Herpeticulture Network group are in that part of the country. And I was talking to Teresa, and that might be something that we could get in the works. We'll see. The weekend of Daytona is actually around Teresa's birthday, so we might have to work something out there. I don't know. I think it'd be cool. I want to try and meet the Herpeticulture Network folks more in real life, not in fake internet life. So we'll try and make it happen. I will end by saying go support USARK. I hope that all of your reptile social media folks and podcasts you follow are continuing to push that message. I know most of the ones that I listen to are. It's very important. I love the work that they do. The folks that work there are awesome. And it can't be overstated how important it is. So I hope folks don't get tired of hearing it over and over again. But support them if you can. And please don't forget that support for things like that doesn't have to be money. It can be sharing Facebook posts. It can be, likes and comments, being aware that, the social media algorithm to help other people see the things depends on your interaction. And so, if you already know that you're a member, that's awesome. But if you want more people in your feed to see it, or maybe some of your other reptile friends or people that are new to the hobby, interacting with them via social media is absolutely a form of support. And it's one that Phil actually talks about quite a bit when you hear him in interviews, is something that USARK is really endeavoring to branch out with and to get more visibility on their initiatives. So, they send out the email stream, they make Facebook posts and things like that. But social media is only as interactive as your followers make it. So that's kind of incumbent on us to really push that out there for them and to help them in that way. So even if you don't support monetarily, you can't afford it or what have you, social media support can be a really big thing for groups like USARK. So I would definitely encourage you guys to continue with that. And we will see you, instead of not 2 weeks, in 1 week. I will see you again. Good night.